A king with more than 20 children, one rightful heir, and a death so absurd it still makes historians wince. He ruled through calculation, silence, and fear until one night everything began to fall apart. What followed was not just a collapse of power, but of trust, loyalty, and bloodline. This is not how kings are supposed to fall. Henry was born around 1068, the youngest son of William the Conqueror and Matilda of Flanders. While his brothers focused on arms and politics, Henry was sent to school. He studied Latin, canon law, and administration, all unusual subjects for a medieval prince. His learning earned him the nickname Beauclerc, or fine scholar. This education would later shape his rule. When William the Conqueror died in 1087, he divided his lands between his sons. Robert received Normandy. William Rufus was crowned King of England. Henry got a chest of silver and nothing more. He tried to turn that money into power. He offered to buy land. He tried to seize control of the Cotentin Peninsula, but both attempts failed. His brothers joined forces and expelled him. By 1091, Henry had neither title nor land. But he hadn't given up. He stayed near court, especially under William Rufus. He fought in campaigns in Wales, built up relationships with nobles, and played the long game. He was biding his time. In 1100, King William Rufus was shot by an arrow while hunting a New Forest. Whether it was a tragic accident or something more sinister has never been proven. Some said it was a stray arrow from a careless hunter. Others believed it was a carefully arranged killing. Regardless of the truth, the real story began with what happened next. Henry acted instantly. He wasted no time mourning. He left the forest and rode straight to Winchester, the location of the royal treasury. There, he secured the symbols of royal authority: the crown, the scepter, and most importantly, the money. Control of the treasury meant control of the realm. From there, he traveled quickly to London. Timing was everything. England had no clear rule about succession. The crown didn't automatically pass to the next in line. Whoever was crowned first had the advantage. Henry arranged a hasty coronation at Westminster Abbey. Within 2 days of William's death, Henry had placed the crown on his own head. It was bold, ruthless, and effective. But he wasn't done. To win over skeptical nobles and churchmen, Henry issued the Charter of Liberties, promising to limit royal abuses and restore good governance. Then he made a brilliant marriage alliance. He married Matilda of Scotland, a descendant of the old Anglo-Saxon royal line. This marriage fused Norman conquest with Saxon heritage. It reassured the barons and gave the people a sense of continuity. Matilda herself was admired for her piety and wisdom, adding both legitimacy and dignity to Henry's rule. Henry styled himself as the Lion of Justice. He issued a Charter of Liberties to win support from nobles and the church, promising to end abuses and restore fair governance. He revived the use of traveling judges who enforced royal law across the realm. Corrupt sheriffs and officials were dismissed. Counterfeiters were blinded. His most enduring achievement was administrative. Around 1107, he created the Exchequer, a formal system for collecting and managing royal revenue. Officials used a checkered cloth to calculate sums with tally sticks, an early form of accounting. This system was so efficient, it lasted for centuries. Under Henry, royal authority expanded. Castles became tools of state power rather than private fiefdoms. Records were kept with care. The government began to resemble a machine, efficient, centralized, and loyal to the king. In 1106, Henry faced one of the most significant challenges to his reign. His older brother Robert, Duke of Normandy, returned from the First Crusade and asserted his claim to the English throne. Robert had once been the favored heir and still commanded respect among many Norman lords. His return sparked tension and anxiety across England and Normandy. The two brothers met on the battlefield near the town of Tinchebray in Normandy. It was not just a conflict between siblings, but a clash between two competing visions for power. Robert, brave but impulsive, led a force filled with veteran crusaders. Henry, precise and organized, relied on disciplined troops and a network of loyal nobles. The battle was fierce but short. Henry's forces quickly overwhelmed Robert's. Robert was captured and, in a decision both ruthless and strategic, Henry ordered that he be imprisoned for life. It wasn't just exile or temporary punishment. It was permanent removal. Robert would spend the next 28 years in confinement, mostly in Devizes and later in Cardiff Castle, never again posing a threat. With Robert neutralized, Henry no longer faced a legitimate internal rival. The defeat also discouraged other rebellious nobles. But Henry didn't rely on force alone. He backed up his rule with law, administration, and loyalty built through the institutions of governance. The victory at Tinchebray marked a turning point, from a contested crown to stable rule. Henry understood how to turn feudal customs into a steady stream of revenue and influence. He exploited his royal prerogative over aristocratic marriages, especially those involving wealthy widows and orphaned heirs. These marriages were not left to chance. If a noblewoman became widowed, Henry had the legal right to decide who she would marry next, and he rarely exercised that right for free. Marriage licenses came at a price. Guardianship of minor heirs came with lucrative access to their estates. Until they came of age, the king could enjoy the income from their lands. This system was not just a matter of greed, it was political leverage. By carefully managing who married whom, Henry could block dangerous alliances and reward loyal families. He turned personal relationships into tools of governance, keeping over-ambitious barons in check. At the same time, Henry fathered at least 22 illegitimate children with various mistresses. But unlike many kings, he didn't discard them. Instead, he placed his sons in bishoprics and married his daughters into noble households. These children became agents of royal power, scattered across England and Normandy. In this way, Henry created an informal network of allies bonded by blood. His family was a political machine, and his court, while outwardly elegant and orderly, functioned like a dynastic chessboard, with every move carefully planned. In 1120, disaster struck with a suddenness that no one could have imagined. Henry's only legitimate son, William Adelin, just 17 years old, was returning to England from Normandy. As the heir to the throne, William was the centerpiece of Henry's dynastic plans. That night, he and over 300 passengers, the elite of Anglo-Norman youth, boarded the White Ship at the port of Barfleur. The vessel was considered one of the finest in the fleet, fast, modern, and crewed by seasoned sailors. The mood on board was raucous. Passengers, including the crew, were heavily intoxicated. There was laughter, boasting, and talk of catching and overtaking the king's own ship, which had already departed. Shortly after leaving the harbor, the White Ship struck a submerged rock. The hull tore apart. Freezing seawater poured in. Panic followed. Few passengers could swim, and lifeboats capsized almost instantly. William initially managed to escape in a dinghy, but when he heard his half-sister Matilda Fitzroy crying for help, he turned back. The small boat was overwhelmed, and both drowned. Among the dead were two of Henry's illegitimate children, Richard and Matilda, Countess of Perche, as well as Richard d'Avranches, Earl of Chester, and his wife Lucia Mahaut of Blois. Many of the kingdom's most prominent families were left without heirs. Stephen of Blois, Henry's nephew and future rival to Matilda, had been scheduled to sail but disembarked shortly before departure, reportedly due to a bout of dysentery, a twist that would change English history. According to legend, only one man survived, a butcher from Rouen named Berold, who clung to floating debris until morning. Chronicler Orderic Vitalis also claimed that the ship's captain, Thomas Fitzstephen, swam to safety, but upon learning of the prince's death, allowed himself to drown, unwilling to face the king with the news. The sinking of the White Ship didn't just drown Henry's son, it submerged England's future. And the question of succession, once seemingly settled, was now dangerously open. After the White Ship disaster, Henry's world was turned upside down. With the death of his son William Adelin, the carefully laid plans for succession collapsed. Henry now faced the unprecedented challenge of naming a female heir. He chose his only surviving legitimate child, Matilda. It was a radical move. No woman had ever ruled England in her own right. The idea of a reigning queen alarmed many nobles, whose traditions and power structures were deeply patriarchal. Henry worked tirelessly to secure her position. In 1127, and again in 1131, he summoned his barons and had them publicly swear oaths of loyalty to Matilda as his rightful successor. To strengthen her claim, he arranged her marriage to Geoffrey of Anjou, a strategic but risky choice. Geoffrey came from a powerful family. but his youth and the historical enmity between Anjou and Normandy made the alliance controversial. Many Norman lords resented the union and questioned Geoffrey's fitness to be consort. Still, Henry pressed forward. He issued charters and took every opportunity to present Matilda as his political equal and intended heir. But no amount of ceremony could erase the fact that power in medieval Europe was rooted in military strength and personal loyalty, and both could shift the moment the king was gone. Henry's preparations were visionary but fragile. Oaths taken out of obligation rarely survive when fear dissolves. What looked strong in life would prove unstable in death. In 1135, while staying in Normandy, Henry fell suddenly ill after consuming a large plate of lampreys, his favorite delicacy. Lampreys, a type of jawless fish, were a prized but risky food, often associated with health problems due to improper preservation. Soon after the meal, Henry developed severe stomach pains and a high fever. His condition deteriorated rapidly. Within a few days, it was clear he would not recover. He gave final orders concerning his possessions and burial, but he had little time to act. When he died on December 1st, 1135, his body quickly began to decompose. The embalming process failed, and the stench became so unbearable that attendants were said to flee the room. In desperation, his salted corpse was sewn into animal hides to slow the decay before it could be transported for burial. Henry was eventually buried at Reading Abbey, the grand monastery he had founded. His death was not only painful and undignified, it triggered the unraveling of the kingdom he had built. Despite all his careful planning, Henry's dynastic vision unraveled almost immediately after his death. Many nobles who had once sworn loyalty to Matilda quickly abandoned her cause. Instead, they rallied around Stephen of Blois, Henry's nephew and a charismatic nobleman with a strong military following. Stephen acted swiftly. He crossed the Channel, raced to London, and secured the crown before Matilda could respond. Matilda, however, was not ready to give up her claim. What followed was a bitter and protracted civil war that lasted from 1139 to 1153. The conflict became known as the Anarchy. Authority broke down across the realm. Castles were constructed without royal license. Banditry and private wars flourished. Villages were looted and trade networks disintegrated. Even churches and abbeys, once sacred and safe, were fortified and sometimes attacked. Chroniclers captured the chaos in a single line: God and his saints slept. Matilda managed to capture Stephen at one point and even entered London, preparing for coronation. But public support wavered, and she was driven out. She never wore the crown. The war dragged on until her son, Henry of Anjou, emerged as a strong contender. It was only in 1153, after years of bloodshed, that a compromise was reached. Stephen would remain king, but Henry would succeed him. Henry I's legacy had survived, but only just. Henry I ruled for 35 years. He brought discipline, law, and record-keeping to a medieval kingdom. He turned feudal England into something closer to a state. His innovations outlived him by centuries, and yet, his greatest failure was dynastic. For all his planning, he couldn't make the barons accept a female heir. He trusted oaths over fear, but those oaths vanished the moment he died. His death brought 2 decades of suffering. Even his physical legacy became uncertain. Henry had been buried in Reading Abbey, the great religious house he had founded, but the abbey was later dissolved during the reign of Henry VIII, and the exact location of the king's tomb was lost to history. For centuries, no one knew where his body lay. In recent years, some archaeologists and historians have suggested that his remains may lie under a modern car park in the town of Reading, much like Richard III's bones were famously found beneath a parking lot in Leicester. If true, one of England's most methodical kings may now rest beneath tarmac and oil stains. A strange ending for a man who once built an empire on order.